2, 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Sumter School District Board of Trustees Policy Committee meeting. First, we'll start with a meditative thought followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. All persons wishing to attend the virtual meeting may do so via YouTube, Sumter School District Board meetings, and Sumter School District's Facebook page. Due to COVID-19 and in compliance with recent public health orders, no members from the public will be able to attend the meeting in person. Vision. The vision of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. Vision. Sumter School District develops and cultivates competitive students who embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively to society. Committee members is Brian Austin. Yours truly is chairman of the policy committee. Reverend McGaney is not here tonight, but he is being represented by our chairwoman, Dr. Jackson, that's joining us via Zoom. Mrs. Cheryl Ray and Dr. Gloria R. Lee. Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, our superintendent, and Ms. Amy Hanson, our administrative manager. Once again, welcome to the Sumter School District Board of Trustees Policy Committee meeting. Hopefully tonight's meeting is fruitful and we can get some things accomplished. So without further ado, we'll start with item number 2, the approval of the agenda. Committee members have been privy to this agenda. If there's not any objections, the agenda will stand approved. Okay. Hearing no objections, the agenda stands approved. We're down to item 3, review of policies and possible amendments. The first one is 3.1, review of policy ACB, educational equity, and sample policy ACA and ACA-R equity. And Dr. Martin Knox, would you just give us an update on the status of those policies?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chairman Austin, members of the Policy Committee, Ms. Ray and Dr. Lee. This evening we have Dr. Moore, who is the Sumter School District liaison, or shall I say the lead, in terms of reviewing our equity policy and pulling together a focus group of staff. And so he is prepared to share with you where we are in terms of the review of our policy and information that may be gleaned from the conversations that he's engaged in with the team. So good evening, Dr. Moore, how are you?
I am well, and I hope everyone else is. Thank you for this opportunity to share some updates. We are excited with the Equity Focus Group. We were especially excited to see the board approval of the policy ACB. And so we met on April 30th, which was the end of last month, to really dig into looking at the work of other school districts. We spent time looking at 4 school districts, the Richland School District 2, Upper Dublin School District, Atlanta Public Schools, and Cincinnati Public Schools, just to make some comparisons at what types of work has been already done with equity, and to get a frame of reference as we apply some of those same principles to our work here in our school district. We had a wonderful conversation, kind of pulled their policies apart, made some great notes, and we're ready to take a look at policy ACB a little more in depth. So our next meeting will be held on May 26th. So that will be next week, and we're going to really look at supporting the policy ACB and what things need to be put in place to make sure that what is in the policy is actually translating into our district. So some of the things that we want to look at the next meeting, we really want to unpack that policy. And what I mean by that is going through the tenets, breaking it down, really unpacking it, and then identifying what is measurable within the policy, because we have already had discussions on, creating a policy is wonderful, and it's the first giant step, but now we want to focus on supporting that policy and making sure that it translates into practice. We also want to identify and prioritize some potential challenges. There may be some things that we can see as a group that may pose some challenges, and we want to get ahead of that. So we're going to take some time really discussing those things. And then we want to get into talking about an equity needs assessment. Across the nation, there's some school districts that have really devoted time and energy into taking a comprehensive needs assessment of how the stakeholders view equity, and making sure that that needs assessment is very formal. So we have identified the Hanover Research Group survey that has been used in Richland 2 as a model in trying to develop our own district equity survey, and this will be something that we want to get out to some of our teachers and staff and possibly even students, just to see what those perceptions are and start putting some data with alongside this policy. That will help us identify gaps in what we want to achieve and where we actually are, our current reality. And using that data, we want to eventually create a Sumter School District equity plan. And that plan will involve goals that will basically take what we discovered in the needs assessment and start putting some action steps to help us make sure that we are aligned to policy ACB. So this is the work that we really are ready to sink our teeth into. And so we'll start those discussions on May 26th. And hopefully our goal is to try to get a survey out to our staff between the end of the year or beginning of next year, so that we can start pulling that data in and looking at it. So that's where we are with equity. Like I said, it's an exciting job. We know that it's a challenging job, but now we have policy ACB to really guide our work, and we're going to dig right into that in our next meeting.
Any questions?
Any questions or comments from anyone?
Any questions?
All right, that is all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next we have item 3.2, review of policy JCA, assignment of students to schools. Marnox, would you like to take the lead on that?
So yes, this policy was brought to the forefront as we know that here in our Sumter community, we are expanding. And so while we are expanding, we need to make sure that we have a balance within our schools, and that while we are identifying the areas by which a community may be designated for their children to attend, we just need to make sure that as the developments are being built, that we have specifics in terms of where the schools, the students would attend that are in that community. So we've been looking at this just to make sure, one, that we are in compliance with our policy, but again, as we're continuing to build and grow here in the Sumter School District, we need to make sure also that students are being routed to the school that's nearest their neighborhood, while also making sure students are safe and can walk in those areas if needed. So we've been looking at ways in which we can help streamline the process for our parents and our military families as they're continuing to move in and out of our community. But we need to make sure that we stay focused on the children. This also aligns with the open enrollment transfer. And so while we looked at this last year to streamline our practices, but not to change the policy, there is a disconnect with this policy and the open enrollment piece as well. So we just need to make sure that when we do things, that the policy is in support of, and that there's a policy that's designated and the language is clear and it's communicated to all stakeholders and constituents.
Marnox, may I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Does the school district receive anything from Board of Realtors or economic development as far as where housing developments are being proposed, being built, so that we have an idea of where we may have additional kids coming into the district?
not to my knowledge, and Ms. Galloway's not on the call, but she's on Zoom. Mr. Myers, do you know of any notification that we may receive when properties are being built, that pertains to student enrollment and zoning?
No, I do not. I think our best option is, at one point, we would check with the real estate commission and get a handle on that. Maybe they can guide us in some of that.
Okay, so, you know, I don't know, I'm sorry, was your hand up? So I just need to make sure that, again, when communities are being built, that we as a school district are aligning ourselves with those communities, because the last thing we want to do is to have students designated to go to schools that are further away from them than what they need to be, and that it is the closest school. So it's just a matter of us looking at this and, again, aligning it with our open enrollment process and really attaching ourselves to the realty or the realtors. I also think that while we have our Citizens Advisory Committee, this will be an opportunity because we do have someone from the Realtors division in the community, a part of that team.
That's right.
Dr. Martinox, you made a reference to a disconnect. Could you give an example of the disconnect? Because we don't have the open enrollment in front of us.
Yes, ma'am. And so what I mean by the disconnect is, so for example, as I travel throughout our community, I'll see where land is being developed to begin to prep for the building of homes and apartment dwellings. And those schools that are closest to those areas may not be the area by which the students would be zoned for. And so what I mean, because the developments are new, they've never been identified in the zoning process. And so that's been a conversation we've been having, and I'll just give an example. There's a sign now that's on 378 where land has been cleared. The apartment or the condo development that's also on Broad Street on the left-hand side, those students have been slated to go to certain schools, and even though there are schools that are closest to them, they're going further away. If you look on 261, there are housing complexes that are being built, but it seems as though they're going further away from the housing development as opposed to the schools that are closest to that development, only because there've never been properties there, or they haven't been properties there in a long time. Those students may be passing schools to get to another school, and that's what I mean by the disconnect. Good question, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lee, go ahead.
And it is hoped that when we get through the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee's recommendation of looking at our transportation, that would help streamline some of this. So what I don't want to do is take a policy apart and then we have the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee have that study done, and then we have to shift again, which means we would have to shift kids. And I don't think that it is in the best interest of children to continue to hop them and bounce them around from school to school. Where they go, they should stay until transition from one level to the next.
Okay, so like you just said, that these new areas that's being developed, so are we gonna be able to reach out to these areas before these students get reassigned to the fall?
So it seems as though the approach is that they are informed what schools they would go to when they're building, but we just don't know,
Okay,
if that makes sense. So like I said, having someone with a real estate background on that Citizens Advisory Committee, it will help a great deal with the communication in terms of what parents are being informed of versus what we as a district should be doing.
okay,
Does that make sense?
yes, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we will move down to 3.3, review of policy KLGA, school resource officers. If you could give us an update on the work that's being done there as well.
Yes, sir. So in terms of the policy with the school resource officers, Mr. Myers and Mr. Williams have been working diligently on this policy and ensuring that we are utilizing language that's appropriate to the 21st century. And avoiding language that's in alignment to the research that's around the school to prison pipeline. And so Mr. Myers and Mr. Williams are going to share with you where we are as we continue to partner with our city police and our sheriff's department. Mr. Myers, Mr. Williams?
Okay, and good afternoon again. We have been working quite diligently in trying to pull information together. We're working, as Dr. Martin Knox said, working to remove a lot of punitive language that may appear within the policy itself. We'll be working on the MOUs and getting the language of that pulled together. And we're working on a true definition for SROs. Mr. Williams and I will be attending the SRO State Conference in June. And it would be good for us to be there to interact with some of the SROs and gather more information that could support the work that we're doing. I'm going to yield to Mr. Williams, and he's going to give a brief overview of the work that has been going on over the past couple of weeks that we've been meeting. Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Myers. At this point, we had an opportunity to go through both policies, KLG and KLGA, and the committee has made some recommendations based on research and looking at other policies as it relates to SROs. And as Mr. Myers stated earlier, the language was a big piece. And just some examples, instead of referring to law, SRO providing community policing, we're recommending language like providing prevention, diversion, and support services to the students. Our next phase in this process is to start to look at MOA to present to the committee for the approval. And we're hoping to pull a lot of that, correspond a lot of that from our training with the South Carolina SRO Association conference in June. And that's all I have. There's just some questions.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Williams, and thank you, Mr. Myers.
Welcome.
We're gonna move down to item 3.4, review of policy ADD, face covering. And Dr. Martinox, if you want to take this as well. And this policy was placed on the agenda just because there's been a lot of movement in the state and from our national public health partners regarding face covering. And I guess for clarification for the public and for our staff and our community, this policy is still in effect, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Could you maybe just touch bases on that this policy, even though this policy is still in effect, that the school district is allowing students and staff to opt out?
So, based on the governor's directive, if you will, that parents should have the option to determine whether their child should or should not wear face coverings to school. While ADD is addressing face coverings as it pertains to the prevention of the transmission of the virus, there's also a component of this face covering that also has religious connotations in it as well, because it also impacts our students who, for religious purposes, wear face coverings to school. So there are two pieces within this policy that we need to take into consideration. And so while the governor put an executive order in place allowing parents to have the option of whether their child should be sent to school with a face mask on, we are still requiring that adults who enter into our buildings and or on any of Sumter School District's property, that they are in a face mask to prevent the transmission of the virus. Again, the students are able to opt out, but one thing that we've also done as a district is staff are able to opt out. However, if they're going into a school to do work or to perform work, they should have on a mask when they're in the building. So the opt-out could pertain to their vehicle, while they're in the cars, while they're traveling to and from one site to another site. They don't have to wear their masks because they're by themselves, but that's only if there's an opt-out form that is submitted. And again, this is part of the executive order from the governor. And as you can see, I still wear my mask, especially when I'm going in and out of schools, because that is the expectation. So children have the option to opt out through their parent or guardian permission. Staff have also been given the opportunity to opt out, and they are to give their opt-out form to their supervisors, but all others are to remain in their face coverings. We also need to make sure that if we are in an area with those who are vaccinated, as the guidelines from the CDC indicate, you do not have to have your face coverings on if you are around individuals who have been vaccinated, and vaccinated for at least the 14 days. We as a staff continue to practice wearing our masks, because that's the safest way. And those who have underlying health conditions are recommended to continue to wear their masks as well. So again, if visitors are coming to the schools, you'll still see a sign on the doors where it's encouraging those individuals who are coming to the schoolhouse to remain covered when they're entering and exiting the building.
You alluded to a point that I wanted to touch on. With our medically fragile students and our staff that have underlying health conditions, how is that looking in our schools now?
I do believe it's fine. Principals are making adjustments, and those individuals who need face masks, who are staff, they're maintaining contact with human resources so that they can get the accommodations for either being in an area that's restricted or where they feel safer in wearing their mask, where they have fewer interactions with individuals. With our students, and I'm glad she's on this call, Ms. Davis, in terms of our students who are medically fragile, do you have a number or any feedback regarding our students who have underlying health conditions that may be impacted in terms of their face coverings?
It just varies on the student. We have had some from the very beginning who could not wear face masks, and we were able to accommodate them safely. Many of the students, the parents did choose to have them to remain at home for that reason. But we did have a few who did enter the schools who could not adhere to the face mask.
And so when thank you, Ms. Davis. And so when Ms. Davis says that the parents are keeping the students home, I know that we had given authorization through our schools for parents to make a decision as to whether students would return face-to-face or whether they will remain virtual. If a parent began sending their children to school face-to-face and then the face covering mandate shift, we are not penalizing those children for returning back to virtual instruction, just as long as the parent has made that request to the school to do so. So, you know, in terms of the specifics, Ms. Davis would have that information, but I have not heard of anything that is concerning in terms of the safety of our children and or staff.
Thank you both for that. You kind of touched on 3.5 as well, review of policy AR-KI-R2, visitors to school face covering, and KI-E, the notice. And that was just talking about that face coverings are still required for visitors to our school and on our school campuses. And you will see those notices posted around Sumter School District. I'm gonna move, if there's no more questions regarding face coverings or visitors and face coverings, we will move on to 3.6, review of policy EBCB, safety plans and drills. And this policy is a policy that we have to submit to the State Department and the State Fire Marshal by July 1st of 2021, and it's a model policy that's attached for your review. I'm not sure if all the members have had a chance to review that policy, or you have any questions concerning those policies.
I did, if I can find where I was looking. So, this actually, does this change what we've been doing as far as, the fire drills? I know it adds the two of the intruder drill. I don't know, how many have we been doing, and have we done more fire drills? And is this an option, or can we stay like we are, or will we, or, you know, I know it says a minimum of something, so.
Yes, ma'am. So one of the things I can say that starting last year, we coordinated a safety team above and beyond the safety drills that schools are conducting to ensure the safety of our students and our staff. So we have a team that was going out and just conducting what we call safety walks in a building, identifying the doors, the windows, if there were cameras that needed to be updated, if the security codes, the security cameras were inoperable. Those are the types of things that we were looking at and going on those safety walks. Mr. Myers, Mr. Williams, do you want to add anything to what I just shared about the safety walks that we conducted last year? And I will say we started them last year, but then of course the pandemic put a hold on that. And so of course we couldn't conduct them. And then we started off again in a virtual capacity, and we're really focused on the instructional piece. And you know, transitioning from hybrid to virtual and virtual to hybrid and face-to-face, we never got back into the flow of doing our safety walks as a team. But there is a committee that was put together, and Ms. Nixon, Mr. Myers, Mr. Williams, Ms. Galloway, the entire executive team was actually a part of that committee as well. Would either of you like to add anything to what I just shared about the requirements for the safety plans and drills?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to say that all of the various walks that we have done with the executive team and other personnel throughout the various schools, those walks have been very beneficial, because as they go to the schools, they see things that I may not see or one of the other persons may not see, and we compile that information and we address it as it's shared with us. And it's been very helpful, and the principals have appreciated that, and they've been open and sharing those kinds of things. Mr. Williams has developed a point of contact with other personnel within the various schools, and there is one from each of the schools. Mr. Williams, you want to give some highlights to your point of contacts?
Yes, sir, Mr. Myers. We've actually extended it. We established some subgroups to take a closer look at our emergency management efforts. We have a committee that's looking at frequently asked questions that we plan to put out. And as well as with the new fire policy that was mentioned, the biggest piece is the assessment that they're asking us to do. And we're already on the forefront of putting that together as well, aligning with what the State Department is asking of us.
So as Mr. Williams said, a part of the new safety component is for us to assess. And, you know, I say all the time, somebody must be telling our secrets, because we started doing it last year. And when we came together as a committee, we had assistant principals on the committee as well, because again, as Mr. Myers said, when I'm in a building or in a facility, there's things that I may not see that someone from the outside may be able to come and see. So the committees kind of converged out onto the schools, went in without interrupting instruction, just to walk the building to see if everything was in order and in accordance with that safety plan that had already been developed. So to your point, we've been doing this, a lot of this previously, but we will continue to adhere to the guidelines and whatever components that may be in the required revisions by South Carolina.
So will the safety team make recommendations of the frequency of drills in accordance with the other things?
We'll look at all of that, yes ma'am, we'll look at all of that. And so, you know, Mr. Williams, like I said, Mr. Williams, Mr. Myers, Ms. Mixon was, but she no longer is, Ms. Galloway, we have assistant principals. Am I missing anybody who's on that committee? And we had food services. We've had people from every area within the school district to be a part of this, because we can't let any part of our building go unaddressed if it is a safety hazard.
Any more questions? Thank you again for that. We're moving down to item 3.7, review of second reading policies, ACE, service animals, GB, GAA, service animal staff, IMG, animals in schools, JLCDD, service animal students. And is there any discussion regarding the recommendation from SCASPA as far as removing the emotional support language from the policy?
That was basically it. We talked about that last time. That was the biggest thing.
That's right. Thank you.
So have we've already taken that out, or that's?
That's just like that meeting or something, next board meeting.
Because remember,
About
you about the, emotional support, so that's out now? Okay.
And that was my error. I'm the one who used the, emotional support animal versus the service animals. And it was my experiences previously, what I wanted to add the language, but again, in advisement with legal, they informed me that it is two different, laws that govern either service animals versus emotional support animals.
Yeah, so that's clear. Okay, thank you.
Is there any more discussion on second reading of those policies? Hearing none, we're down to item 3.8, review for second reading policy AR BDE-R board committees. Any discussion on this? If I may, to this body, with this policy, wanted to get your input on adding language concerning confidentiality and ethics of our committee members, as well as our members of our Citizens Advisory. If we could add the language, Amy, if you could, the language, that's used on the application, could we insert that language as well into the policy?
Yeah.
And in the policy as well, when we speak of at least, the number of members, could we put on there, see, it's already on here. Just draw your attention to it where we have at least 2 professionals with expertise in these areas. That was just something that needed to be put in there, considering that the nominations we have is 2 for each one of those committees so far.
Okay.
And just to reiterate the point that this is a way to further enlarge community input into the work that we're doing as a board, through the work of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Any discussion moving forward on that? Any more discussion?
No.
Ms. Wright? Okay. We're now down to item 3.9, review for second reading policy KF, community use of school facilities. Is there any discussion or any changes that we foresee that needs to be made in this policy before second reading? Hearing none, we're down to item 4, steps moving forward. 4.1 is policies for further discussion by the policy committee. At this time, if I may, I would say that would be the equity policy, the assignment of students to schools, the school resource officers policy. Is there any policies that we will continue to review as a committee outside of the ones that I have mentioned thus far? And the safety plan, of course, safety plans and drills. Anything else? We're now down to item 4.2, recommendations to the Board of Trustees. At this time, the policy committee looks forward to bringing recommendations to the full Board of Trustees at the next regular scheduled meeting, as well as working closely with the administration on the policies for further discussion as well. At that next regular scheduled meeting, we will update the full board on our discussion here tonight and of any concerns or things that the full board would like us to look at. Anything else from the committee before we move on? We're down down to item 5, the consent agenda. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at the policy committee minutes. Without objection, the minutes will be approved. Is there any objection to those minutes being approved? Hearing none from the body, those minutes will be approved. We're now down to item 6, closing of the meeting. I would like to say to our staff that's joined us and updated us on their work that they're doing, thank you so much. To our members of our public, thank you for joining us this afternoon. To Dr. Martin Knox and your administrative team, thank you so much for all the hard work that you do each and every day on behalf of our students and staff. Is there any remarks from the committee? Okay, we're now down to item 6.2, which is adjournment of the meeting, and this meeting is adjourned at 6:37.